The first thing I noticed wasn't the handcuffs in her glove compartment. It was the pale band of skin around Lila's ring finger where her wedding band used to be. My name is Shane Calloway, and I've been married to Lila for 8 years. 8 years of what I thought was a decent marriage, complete with morning coffee rituals, shared Netflix passwords, and the kind of comfortable silence that comes when two people actually know each other. Or so I believed. The handcuffs were pink and fuzzy, still in their novelty packaging from some adult store downtown. Definitely not our flavor of kink. I'd been looking for jumper cables in her Honda when I found them, tucked beneath insurance papers and old receipts like a dirty secret waiting to surface. "Hey, Lila," I called out as she emerged from our brick townhouse, designer purse slung over her shoulder. "Working late again tonight?" She paused at the bottom of our front steps, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the iron railing. Even at 7 in the morning, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Blonde hair and a sleek bob, makeup flawless, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck from the construction company. "You know how it is with the restaurant business, Shane. Inventory doesn't count itself." Her voice carried that familiar edge of irritation, like I was some inconvenience she had to navigate around. The restaurant, right. Lila claimed to manage a high-end establishment downtown, something exclusive that catered to wealthy clientele. Funny thing was, in 8 years of marriage, I'd never actually seen the place. Every time I suggested dropping by or meeting her for lunch, she had an excuse ready. "Must be some inventory," I said, holding up the handcuffs. "These fall out of your glove box." For just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Those are gag gifts from Candy's bachelorette party last month. I forgot they were in there." She snatched them from my hand, her fingers ice cold despite the warm September morning. "God, Shane, you're so paranoid lately." Paranoid. That was her favorite word for me these days. Paranoid when I asked about her late nights. Paranoid when I wondered why she'd stopped wearing her rings. Paranoid when I noticed she'd changed her phone password and started taking calls in the other room. "Where's your wedding ring, Lila?" "Getting cleaned. The jeweler said it might take a week." She was already walking toward her car, heels clicking against the sidewalk with military precision. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up." I watched her drive away, noting how she checked her phone the moment she thought she was out of sight. The Honda's taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving me standing in our driveway with more questions than answers. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where people minded their own business, mostly. Old brick row houses lined both sides of the street, each one identical except for the color of the front door and the state of the small front gardens. Ours had the red door and the dying rose bush that Lila had insisted on planting during our first year of marriage. Mrs. Marta from next door was already at her window, coffee mug in hand, watching the morning drama unfold. She gave me a little wave that somehow managed to convey both sympathy and curiosity. Neighborhood gossips have a sixth sense about marital trouble. I headed back inside, my work boots echoing in the narrow hallway. Our house was nice enough. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that Lila had renovated with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The kind of place that looked perfect in real estate photos, but felt increasingly hollow in real life. The coffee maker was still warm from Lila's morning routine. I poured myself a cup and tried to make sense of the growing list of inconsistencies in my wife's behavior. The late nights had started 6 months ago. The missing ring was new, maybe 2 weeks. The cold shoulder in bed, the way she flinched when I touched her unexpectedly. The mysterious phone calls, all recent developments. My phone buzzed with a text from my work crew. Another day of managing construction projects for the city, dealing with permits and contractors, and the endless bureaucracy that came with public works. Honest work that paid the bills and kept me grounded in reality. But first, I needed answers. My brother Eddie ran a private investigation business out of a cramped office above Murphy's pawn shop on the other side of town. Eddie was older by 5 years and infinitely more cynical about human nature. He'd spent 15 years as a city cop before a bullet in the leg, and a divorce convinced him that private work was safer and more profitable. I found him at his desk, surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups, squinting at a computer screen that had seen better days. The office smelled like stale cigarettes and disappointment, with a hint of the Chinese takeout place downstairs. "Shane," he looked up from his computer, taking in my expression. You look like heck. What's wrong? I need your help with something personal. Eddie leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. He'd put on maybe 30 pounds since leaving the force, but he still had the sharp eyes of a cop and the instincts of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's dark side. This about Lila? I shouldn't have been surprised that he'd guessed. Eddie had never particularly liked my wife, though he'd been polite enough to keep his opinions to himself, mostly. She's hiding something. I don't know what, but something big. I told him about the missing ring, the handcuffs, the late nights, the way she'd become a stranger in our own house. Eddie listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You sure you want to know what I find? What kind of question is that? The kind that comes from 20 years of digging up secrets people would rather keep buried. He tapped his pen against the desk. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss, Shane. Sometimes the truth is worse than whatever you're imagining. I thought about going home to our empty house, pretending everything was normal, waiting for Lila to come home, smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. I thought about the pink handcuffs and the pale band of skin where her wedding ring used to be. I need to know. Eddie nodded slowly. Give me 3 days. And Shane, whatever I find, we handle it smart. No going off half-cocked, no confrontations until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Promise me. I promise. But even as I said it, I could feel something cold and hard settling in my chest. Something that felt like the beginning of the end. 3 days felt like 3 years. I went through the motions of normal life. Work, dinner, pretending to watch TV while Lila sat beside me scrolling through her phone. She was home earlier those 3 nights, almost as if she sensed something had shifted. Women have radar for that kind of thing. On Thursday morning, Eddie called. Meet me at the office. And Shane, bring a strong stomach. The drive across town gave me too much time to think. Part of me still hoped Eddie would tell me I was being paranoid, that Lila was planning a surprise party or taking night classes or doing something innocent and boring. But the cold knot in my stomach suggested otherwise. Eddie's office felt smaller than usual, crowded with manila folders and photographs and spread across every available surface. He looked like he hadn't slept much. Sit down, he said, not looking at me. Just tell me. Sit down. I sat. Eddie picked up a photograph and held it out to me. It showed the front of a building I didn't recognize, red brick, neon signs, tinted windows, the kind of place that tried too hard to look classy and ended up looking sleazy instead. The Velvet Room, Eddie said. Downtown, near the warehouse district. It's a gentleman's club. High-end, exclusive clientele, very discreet. I stared at the photo. Okay, so your wife doesn't manage a restaurant, Shane. She owns this place. Has for about 4 years, according to the business license. The words hit me like a physical blow. I set the photograph down with hands that weren't quite steady. That's impossible. I've got bank records, tax documents, employee payroll. Lila Calloway is listed as the owner and primary operator of the Velvet Room. Eddie's voice was gentle but relentless. She's not just managing it, Shane. Some nights, she's the main attraction. He handed me another photograph. This one showed a woman on a small stage, blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders, wearing very little and smiling for an audience I couldn't see. It took me several seconds to recognize my wife. Jesus Christ. The words came out as barely a whisper. There's more. Eddie pulled out a thick folder. Your wife has been having an affair with Victor Renz, the club's manager. Ex-boxer. Has a record for attack and battery. Thinks he's God's gift to women. They've been together for at least 2 years, maybe longer. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. The woman in the photograph looked like Lila, moved like Lila, but she was a stranger. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never seen her look that confident, that alive, that free. The late nights, the missing ring, the phone calls, it all fits, Eddie continued. She's been living a double life, Shane. The restaurant story was just cover. Why? The question came out cracked and raw. Why lie about everything? Why marry me at all? Eddie shrugged. Maybe she wanted normal. Maybe she needed the respectability of a husband for business purposes. Maybe she actually loved you once and things just got complicated. He paused. Does it matter? It should have mattered. I should have cared about her motivations, her feelings, the complex web of choices that had led us to this moment. but all I felt was a cold, clean rage that cut through the confusion like a blade. What else? The club caters to some very prominent clients. City councilmen, judges, business owners, married men with reputations to protect. Eddie pulled out a client list. Rich guys who pay premium prices for discretion and privacy. I scanned the names, recognizing several from the newspaper's business section. Pillars of the community, family men, the kind of people who gave speeches about moral values and traditional marriage. This is a gold mine, I said slowly. That's what I was thinking. Eddie leaned forward. The question is, what do you want to do with it? For the first time in 3 days, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I want to burn it all down. Eddie nodded approvingly. Now you're talking my language, but we do this smart, methodical. We make sure every move is legal and every piece of evidence is solid. We're not just exposing Lila, we're taking down an entire network of lies and hypocrisy. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Eddie had contacts throughout the city, former cops and private investigators who specialized in surveillance and information gathering. We mapped out the club's operation, identified key players, and began building comprehensive files on everyone involved. First step, Eddie said, we document everything. Photos, videos, financial records, client information. We need enough evidence to bury them all. What about Lila? What about her? Do I confront her? Demand an explanation? Eddie shook his head. Not yet. Right now, she doesn't know we know. That's our advantage. The moment you confront her, she'll lawyer up and start covering tracks. We need to move fast while we still have the element of surprise. I thought about going home to our brick townhouse, sitting across from Lila at dinner, pretending I still believed her lies. The idea made my stomach turn. I don't know if I can do that. Act normal. You can and you will, Eddie said firmly. Because the alternative is letting her get away with it. She's made a fool of you for years, Shane. Don't let her win by tipping our hand too early. He was right, of course. But as I drove home through the late afternoon traffic, I felt like I was drowning in my own life. Everything I'd believed about my marriage, my wife, my future, all of it was built on lies. Lila was already home when I walked through the front door, standing in the kitchen wearing jeans and a sweater, looking like the woman I'd married. Domestic, approachable, safe. How was your day? She asked, not looking up from the salad she was preparing. Fine, same old stuff. I kept my voice level, casual. You're home early? Slow night at the restaurant. Thought I'd cook for once. She glanced at me with something that might have been guilt. We haven't been spending much time together lately. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Instead, I opened a beer and sat at the kitchen island, watching her move around our kitchen like she belonged there. Like this was her real life instead of just another performance. Lila, I said carefully, are you happy? She paused in her chopping, the knife suspended over a tomato. What kind of question is that? An honest one. She resumed cutting, each slice precise and deliberate. Of course I'm happy. We have a nice house, good jobs, a comfortable life. What more could I want? What more indeed? Apparently she'd wanted excitement, danger, the thrill of living on the edge while maintaining the facade of suburban respectability. She'd wanted her cake, and to eat it too. Just checking, I said. We ate dinner in relative silence, making small talk about work and weather and neighborhood gossip. Lila seemed more relaxed than she'd been in months, as if my question about her happiness had somehow reassured her that I was still the oblivious husband she could easily manipulate. After dinner, she curled up beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder while we watched some mindless sitcom. She felt warm and familiar, and for a moment I almost forgot about the photographs in Eddie's office. Almost. Shane? Her voice was soft, vulnerable, in a way I hadn't heard in years. I love you. You know that, right? I looked down at her, at the woman who'd been lying to me for years, who'd built an entire secret life while I worked honest jobs and paid our mortgage and believed in our future together. I know, I said, but I was already planning her destruction. The surveillance started the next morning. Eddie had called in favors from 3 different PI firms, creating a network of watchers who could track Lila's movements without being detected. Professional-grade equipment, telephoto lenses, audio recording devices, the full arsenal of the modern investigation. We're not just watching your wife, Eddie explained as we sat in his office, reviewing the operational plan. We're documenting an entire criminal enterprise. The club operates without proper licensing, evades taxes, and caters to clients who are violating their own professional ethics codes. I studied the surveillance schedule. This is going to cost a fortune. Consider it an investment in your future happiness. Eddie lit another cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign on his own wall. Besides, once we're done, Lila's going to be paying for everything through asset forfeiture and divorce settlements. The first week of surveillance yielded a treasure trove of information. Lila's daily routine was more complex than I'd imagined. She left our house each morning dressed like a respectable businesswoman, but by afternoon she'd transformed into someone I barely recognized. Eddie's team captured her entering the Velvet Room through a back entrance, emerging hours later in revealing outfits that left little to the imagination. They documented her meetings with Victor Renz, their obvious closeness, the way they moved together like longtime lovers comfortable in their deception. "Look at this," Eddie said, spreading photographs across his desk like playing cards. "Your wife and her boyfriend, having lunch at Romano's downtown, public displays of affection, holding hands, the whole romantic comedy routine." The photos showed Lila laughing at something Victor had said, her face animated in a way I rarely saw at home. She looked genuinely happy, genuinely in love. With him, not me. How long have they been together? Based on what we've documented so far, at least 2 years. Probably longer. Eddie pointed to a photo of Victor kissing Lila's neck while she leaned against his car. "This isn't new relationship energy, Shane. This is established closeness." 2 years, maybe longer. While I'd been working overtime to pay for her renovations and vacations and designer clothes, she'd been building a life with another man. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that it almost impressed me. What about the clients? Eddie opened another file, this one thick with names and photographs. We've identified 43 regular customers, including 2 city council members, a county judge, the president of First National Bank, and the owner of the largest car dealership in the state. I recognized several faces from local television and newspaper coverage. Respected community leaders, family men who gave speeches at charity events and posed for pictures with their wives and children. They all know what kind of place it is? Oh, they know. The Velvet Room isn't trying to hide what it offers. Discreet, high-end adult entertainment for men who can afford to pay premium prices for privacy. Eddie pulled out a financial spreadsheet. Your wife has been grossing about $30,000 a month from this operation. $30,000 a month. More than I made in 3 months of construction work. No wonder she could afford designer clothes and expensive cars while claiming to manage a restaurant that I'd never seen. Where's all that money going? Good question. Eddie highlighted several entries on the spreadsheet. She's got multiple bank accounts, some under her maiden name, others under business aliases, shell companies, offshore accounts, the whole sophisticated money laundering setup. I stared at the financial documents, trying to process the scope of Lila's deception. This wasn't just an affair, or even a secret job. This was an entire parallel life, complete with its own financial infrastructure and business relationships. She's been planning this for years, I said. Looks that way. The question is, planning what? An exit strategy, a way to fund her lifestyle without depending on your income? Or maybe she just likes the thrill of living dangerously. That evening, I sat across from Lila at our dining room table, watching her eat pasta and talk about her day at the fictional restaurant. She was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, weaving elaborate stories about difficult customers and kitchen disasters with the kind of detail that made them seem real. How's the renovation coming? I asked, playing along with her charade. Lee, you know how contractors can be. She rolled her eyes in mock frustration. They promise one thing and deliver another, but we should be able to expand the private dining area by Christmas. Private dining area. I almost choked on my wine. If only she knew how accurate that description really was. Maybe I could help, with the construction aspects. For just a moment, panic flashed across her face. Oh, that's sweet, but it's all very specialized work, restaurant regulations, commercial codes, not really your area of expertise. She was good, I had to admit. Quick thinking, plausible excuses, just enough truth mixed with the lies to make them believable. Under different circumstances, I might have admired her skill. Of course, I said. I just want to help. I know you do. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her wedding ring noticeably absent. You're a good husband, Shane? I'm lucky to have you. The irony was so thick I could taste it, but I squeezed back and smiled and played my part in our elaborate theater of deception. Later that night, after Lila had gone to bed, I sat in our living room with a beer and my laptop, researching everything I could find about the Velvet Room and its clientele. The internet was surprisingly helpful once I knew what to look for. Business licenses, property records, tax filings, all public information that painted a picture of a sophisticated operation that had been flying under the radar for years. Lila had been careful, but not careful enough. There were always traces, always connections that could be followed by someone who knew where to look. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. Got something big. Meet me tomorrow morning. Early. I finished my beer and headed upstairs, where Lila was sleeping peacefully in our bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like a halo. She looked innocent, vulnerable, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But appearances, as I was learning, could be devastatingly deceptive. Tomorrow, Eddie would show me whatever new evidence he'd uncovered. Tomorrow, we'd take another step toward exposing the elaborate web of lies that had become my marriage. Tonight, I lay awake beside my wife and planned the systematic destruction of everything she'd built. Eddie was waiting for me with coffee and a grin that could only mean trouble. His office looked like a detective movie set. Photographs pinned to corkboards, string connecting various pieces of evidence, computer screens displaying financial records and surveillance footage. Tell me you've got something good, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Better than good, I've got the smoking tool. Eddie pulled up a video file on his computer. Watch this. The footage showed the interior of what appeared to be a private office, expensively furnished with leather chairs and dark wood paneling. Lila sat behind a large desk, dressed professionally, speaking with a man I recognized from the newspaper's business section, Robert Chen, president of First National Bank. The audio's crystal clear, Eddie said, turning up the volume. The usual arrangement? Lila was saying. Private room, 2 hours, complete discretion. Candy will take excellent care of you. Chen nodded, sliding an envelope across the desk. Same as last month? Of course. We value our regular clients. Lila's voice was businesslike, professional. This was clearly a routine transaction. Eddie paused the video. She's not just performing, Shane. She's running the entire operation. Scheduling, finances, client relations. Your wife is the CEO of a high-end illicit operation. The words hit me like a physical blow. Somehow, learning that Lila was having an affair and working at a nightclub had seemed manageable, even if devastating. But this was something else entirely. Are you sure? We've got hours of footage. Lila meeting with clients, arranging services, handling payments. She's built a sophisticated business that caters to wealthy men who want more than just entertainment. Eddie pulled up another file. The financial records confirm it. The Velvet Room is grossing over $50,000 a month. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, trying to reconcile the woman in the video with the person I'd been married to for 8 years. How had I missed this? How had I been so completely blind to what was happening in my own house? There's more, Eddie said, clearly enjoying my shock. We've identified the other women working for her. Candy Morrison, Jessica Walsh, Angela Torres, all of them operating under stage names, all of them providing services that go well beyond dancing. He showed me photographs of the women, some taken at the club, others captured during meetings with clients at expensive hotels downtown. They were all attractive, professional-looking, the kind of women who could blend into any upscale social setting. It's a sophisticated operation, Eddie continued. Background checks on clients, health screenings for the women, legal protection through shell companies and offshore accounts. Your wife didn't just stumble into this business, Shane. She built it from the ground up. I thought about all the nights Lila had come home late, claiming to be exhausted from managing restaurant inventory, all the business trips that had taken her out of town for days at a time, all the expensive clothes and jewelry that she'd claimed were necessary for maintaining a professional appearance. How long has this been going on? Based on the financial records, at least 4 years, probably longer. Eddie lit another cigarette, studying my face. The question is, what do you want to do about it? What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to confront Lila immediately, to demand explanations and apologies and some kind of accounting for the years of lies. But a larger part of me wanted revenge. Systematic, thorough, devastating revenge. I want to destroy her, I said quietly. Eddie smiled approvingly. Now you're talking my language. But we do this smart. We don't just expose Lila. We take down the entire network, the clients, the business, the financial structure. We make sure everyone pays for their part in this deception. We spent the next 3 hours planning what Eddie called Operation Cleanup. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Expose everyone simultaneously, creating a cascade of scandal that would destroy reputations and relationships throughout the city's elite social circles. First, we contact the wives, Eddie explained, pulling up a list of client names. Anonymous packages with photographs and documentation of their husbands' activities. Let them decide how to handle their own situations. That's cruel. That's justice. These men have been living double lives, just like your wife. Their families deserve to know the truth. He was right, of course. The wives and children of Lila's clients were innocent victims, just like I had been. They deserved to know what kind of men they were married to. Second, we leaked the financial information to the IRS and state tax authorities. All that unreported income is going to generate some serious legal problems. And third, Eddie's grin was positively predatory. Third, we go public. Local media, social media, business publications. We make sure everyone in the city knows exactly what kind of establishment the Velvet Room really is. The plan was comprehensive, devastating, and completely legal. We weren't breaking any laws or violating anyone's rights. We were simply exposing the truth that had been hidden for years. When do we start? Tomorrow. But first, you need to secure your own assets. Joint bank accounts, credit cards, anything that Lila might try to drain once she realizes what's happening. That afternoon, I visited 3 different banks, quietly moving funds from joint accounts into new accounts that only I could access. I canceled credit cards, changed passwords, and began the process of legally protecting myself from whatever financial retaliation Lila might attempt. The process felt surreal, like I was preparing for war against someone I'd once loved. But as I sat in the lawyer's office, signing documents and discussing asset protection strategies, I realized that the war had actually started years ago. I was just finally fighting back. That evening, Lila seemed unusually affectionate, curling up beside me on the couch and asking about my day with what appeared to be genuine interest. She was either feeling guilty about her deception or sensing that something had changed in our relationship. "You seem different lately," she said, tracing patterns on my chest with her finger. "Different how?" "I don't know. More confident, maybe? Like you've figured something out." If only she knew. I was about to respond when her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then set the phone aside without responding. "Work?" I asked casually. "Just Candy, asking about tomorrow's schedule." The lie came so easily that I almost admired her skill. Nothing important. Nothing important. Just the systematic destruction of everything she'd built, starting in approximately 12 hours. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her expensive shampoo. "I love you too, Lila." And in that moment, I realized it was true. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and betrayal and systematic deception, part of me still loved the woman I'd married, which made what I was about to do both easier and infinitely more difficult. But love, as I was learning, wasn't always enough. Sometimes justice mattered more. The packages went out at dawn. Eddie had assembled teams of private investigators and process servers who delivered manila envelopes to 37 different addresses across the city. Each envelope contained photographs, financial records, and detailed documentation of infidelity that would destroy marriages and reputations with surgical precision. I sat in Eddie's office, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up, knowing that in a few hours, dozens of families would be dealing with revelations that would change their lives forever. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt like standing at the epicenter of an earthquake. "The first calls should start coming in around 8, Eddie said, monitoring multiple phone lines and computer screens. Angry wives, panicked husbands, lawyers demanding to know where we got our information. Are we prepared for that? Everything we've done is completely legal. Public records, surveillance from public spaces, financial information obtained through legitimate investigative channels." Eddie pulled up a legal brief. "We're not blackmailers or extortionists. We're just private citizens exercising our right to expose the truth." At 8:17 a.m., the first call came in. A woman's voice, shaking with rage and hurt, demanding to know who had sent her photographs of her husband with another woman. Eddie handled it professionally, explaining that the information had been gathered during a legitimate investigation and that she was free to use it however she saw fit. By 9:30, the phone was ringing constantly. Lawyers, private investigators, angry spouses, and at least 3 reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Eddie had hired additional staff to handle the volume, turning his small office into a crisis management center. Channel 7 wants an interview, Eddie announced, hanging up from yet another call. They're calling it the biggest scandal to hit the city in decades. I thought about Lila, probably at the Velvet Room, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. Part of me wanted to call and warn her, to give her a chance to prepare for what was coming. But she'd had 8 years to tell me the truth, and she'd chosen deception instead. What about the financial investigation? IRS called an hour ago. They're very interested in our documentation of unreported income and potential tax evasion. Eddie grinned wolfishly. Turns out the federal government doesn't like it when people hide millions of dollars in offshore accounts. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. Lila's name appeared on the caller ID, and for a moment I considered not answering. But curiosity won out. Shane? Her voice was tight with panic. Something's wrong. The club, there are reporters outside and clients are canceling, and I don't understand what's happening. Maybe you should come home, I said calmly. We need to talk. Talk about what? Shane, you're scaring me. Just come home, Lila. I hung up before she could respond, then drove across town to our brick townhouse, where I waited for my wife to come home and face the consequences of her choices. She arrived 20 minutes later, bursting through the front door like a woman fleeing a fire. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled from stress. Shane, thank God you're here. Something terrible is happening. Someone's been spreading lies about the restaurant and... Sit down, Lila. Something in my voice stopped her mid-sentence. She looked at me carefully, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You know, she said quietly, I know everything. The Velvet Room, Victor Renz, the clients, the money, all of it. She sank onto our couch, her face going pale beneath her makeup. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled with 8 years of lies and betrayal. How long have you known? She finally asked. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to contact every client's wife. Long enough to notify the IRS about your unreported income. I sat across from her, studying the woman I'd married. Long enough to realize that I never really knew you at all. Lila's composure cracked, and she began to cry. Not the delicate tears of a woman seeking sympathy, but the harsh, ugly sobs of someone whose world was ending. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said through her tears. It started small, just dancing, just entertainment. But the money was so good, and the clients wanted more, and Victor said we could make a fortune if we were smart about it. So you decided to lie to me for 4 years. I was protecting you. You never would have understood. You're too straight, too honest, too stupid. She looked up at me, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I never thought you were stupid, Shane. I thought you were safe. Safe, the word hit me like a slap. I'd been her cover story, her respectable facade, her insurance policy against a world that might judge her for her choices. I'd never been her husband in any meaningful sense. I'd been her alibi. Where's Victor now? Gone. He left town this morning when the reporters showed up. Took whatever cash he could carry and disappeared. Her laugh was bitter, broken. Turns out he wasn't as loyal as I thought. Of course he'd run. Men like Victor Renz were predators, not partners. They took what they could get and abandoned ship the moment things got complicated. What happens now? She asked. Now you face the consequences. The IRS investigation, the divorce proceedings, the criminal charges that are probably coming. I stood up, looking down at the woman who had shared my bed and lied to my face for years. Now you get exactly what you deserve. Shane, please. We can work this out. I can explain everything, make you understand. Understand what? That you've been running a criminal enterprise while I worked construction jobs to pay our mortgage? That you've been sleeping with another man while pretending to love me? That everything about our marriage has been a lie? She had no answer for that. No explanation that could bridge the gap between the woman I'd thought I married and the stranger sitting on our couch. I'll be staying at Eddie's tonight, I said, heading for the door. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Shane, wait. I paused at the threshold, not turning around. I did love you, she said quietly. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did love you. No, Lila. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a husband who wouldn't ask too many questions and wouldn't look too closely at your lies. I opened the door, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight. You never loved me at all. I drove away from our house for the last time, leaving behind 8 years of marriage and the wreckage of everything I'd thought I wanted. In my rearview mirror, I could see Lila standing in our doorway, watching me go. By evening, the story had exploded across local media. "High-end illicit operation exposed," read the headline in the evening paper. "Prominent citizens implicated in love scandal," announced the 10 o'clock news. I watched the coverage from Eddie's office, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and the debris of our successful investigation. Reporters interviewed shocked neighbors, angry wives, and city officials promising thorough investigations and swift justice. "You did it," Eddie said, raising a beer in salute. "You brought down the whole corrupt system." But as I watched footage of police officers entering the Velvet Room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. "What's next?" I asked. "Next, you rebuild. New life, new relationships, new possibilities." Eddie clapped me on the shoulder. "You're free, Shane. For the first time in years, you're completely free." Free, like the word should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt like falling into an abyss with no bottom and no end. But as I sat there watching my wife's empire crumble on live television, I realized that freedom was exactly what I'd been fighting for. The freedom to live without lies, to love without deception, to build something real on a foundation of truth. The reckoning was complete. Justice had been served. Now I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life.